With your television set. Nothing less astronomical.
Total crazy.
Good evening. Mind is going. Do not attempt to adjust the bridge. It's still coming! I feel much better.
Lift off.
Science fiction is the true literature of the 20th century, showing us the present through an image of the future.
What science fiction tells you about is the same thing that any other kind of fiction tells you about, which is the world we live in.
I don't think there's any science fiction movie that I've seen or have made that has anything to do with the future in the first place.
I'm always quoting my friend Ray Bradbury. I don't try to predict the future, I try to prevent it.
Science fiction can prepare the reader for unpleasant surprises, but the surprises are going to come all the same.
Cinema picked up on time travel from the word go. I mean, there are silent movies where people are in train wrecks and the force of the wreck knocks them back to Arthur's England. Connecticut Yankee. I think, I don't know, it's a toss-up whether it was H.G. Wells or Mark Twain who invented time travel.
One of the ideas that science fiction deals with when you talk about time traveling science fiction is the idea that if you go back in time and change an event in the past, you can somehow reshape the future. People always pick up on the philosophical side of it by saying, well, would that be true? You know, if you went back and you killed Hitler, could you avoid the Second World War? But what happens if you perhaps tread on a butterfly and therefore you change the course of the evolution of history? What they don't pick up on is that that's not really what science fiction is talking about when it's talking about those things. What it's talking about is the way in which you can or cannot control your own environment and the effect that the past has on the present.
When I was about 7, my parents gave me a copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne. I didn't know it was science fiction, of course. I knew it was just a wonderful story. Almost immediately, I stumbled onto H.G. Wells and The Time Machine, and I'm afraid there was no turning back for me after that.
Science fiction found its first mass audience in the pulp magazines of the 1920s, where stories of time travel fired the public imagination.
They started in 1926, science fiction magazines. They were going to teach children and young adults about the world to come. And they did so with very limited success for a little while until they realized that what they really needed to do was tell stories about the world to come. Within a year or so, they were reducing their reprints. They were buying in from England, where people like Wells had been running for a number of years, and bringing in the pulp writers.
Eventually, I ran out of everything that the library had in the way of H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and John Taine, and the other people who published real books. So, willy-nilly, I turned to those horrible magazines and discovered that behind the hideous exterior were some wonderful stories.
Today, the famous Kraft TV cameraman focuses on outer space.
Control deck to all stations. Stand by to raise ship. Blast off, -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0!
The 1940s was perhaps the last period in Western civilization that it was possible to think that the world of science, the world of progress, the world of big bulldozers, and the world itself might marry happily.
Oh, hi there. You know, one of the first things we learned about space travel here at Space Academy was the importance of high-quality, high-energy fuel for the blastoff. And that goes not just for rocket ships, but for people. including spacemen and potential spacemen, like you kids out there. You know, high-quality candy like Kraft Caramels gives your body the kind of fuel it needs for quick takeoff.
Early time travel stories reflected an innocent view of the world, but already some writers were using science fiction to comment on their own time. Orwell's 1984 was really about 1948. Indeed, many writers were already playing with time travel to alter history. Cinema picked up on this theme, and films such as The Philadelphia Experiment and its sequel look at the consequences of reversing the outcome of World War II.
In our story, they don't, the Germans don't care about altering history because they have no sense of what the history is. They're trying to win the war. So they learn how to fly a stealth bomber in a matter of days, and they bomb Washington, and suddenly history has changed.
The premise is relatively simple. I'm not sure if you know the original Philadelphia Experiment, but it was essentially about things moving through time vortexes into, some people came forward from the 40s into the early 80s when the movie was originally made. The concept that I had and introduced into the script is really to do with alternate realities. I also done a student film when I was at USC, which was a film that was a nightmare scenario, or set in a kind of nightmare scenario USA, which had been taken over by the religious right and was in a sort of state of civil war. And I would not say that I was passionate a science fiction freak in any sense. What I enjoy about it, particularly in the context of American film, is the opportunity to sit back. It's almost one of the few worlds that in the American genre of film allows you really to kind of comment on society as we live in it. And for some reason it really ties in to the whole American psyche, that you can create a world which allows you to comment on the world you're from.
Science fiction movies that we see and are making are more a reflection on what they are now and extrapolating that a little bit, making it bigger or spreading it out over all the streets of the town, say, instead of being one street. But that it is not really an indication of what the future is going to bring us. Fortunately, I would say, because most of these visions in the movies are pretty dark, you know.
Very bad things happen in science fiction, it has to be said. It's not really about progress. It's generally about things going wrong.
Early magazines had robots battling for supremacy in extravagant space operas. But after 1937, with John W. Campbell as editor, the magazine Astounding took science more seriously. Isaac Asimov championed a valiant breed of robot who could solve our problems through technology. This golden age was to last throughout the 40s.
Under John W. Campbell, there were suddenly writers who took very seriously what they were writing about. Robert A. Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Theodore Sturgeon, who emerged from Campbell's workshop, as it were.
Isaac Asimov's robots were, in the first instance, a literary device to clean the pulp field of robots which ran around raping women. In the second instance, it was an argument about the nature of artificial intelligence.
In the 50s, robots became much more complex, with exotic cyborgs and androids emerging in the work of many writers.
The most important writer of the early 1950s was Philip K. Dick. He is the prime writer of the 50s. The paranoia, the insecurity, the sense that reality was not a secure thing any longer, all were expressed by Dick in hundreds of short stories, a dozen or so non-SF novels, and his famous SF novels.
Dick's works have often been cannibalized by people that, without really respect. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was a lovely, lovely story about we can build things that are human, are animal, and can we tell the difference? These things function as well as we certainly do.
and they slapped it all together in that very high-tech, good-looking movie, Blade Runner, but they didn't even put the name on the film, which was a shame, because for me, the name really represented the book.
I've never been reading too much about science fiction or reading science fiction. I have never been addicted to that. I was interested in comic books that were about science fiction or had science fiction characters, the Flash Gordon type of stuff. And then for a long time, I thought it was all stupid.
Watch the fireworks. Oh, look! The Solarite ship is nearly upon us! To the caverns where you're lying! It's locked.
No more. The world is safe.
It's only again when I came to the United States that, not that my interest in science fiction then started again. It was just that the first movie I did in the United States was a science fiction movie. And when I got that script, that started my interest again. So it was, for me, a feeling of going back to my childhood.
Rebels blew up the airport in Acapulco yesterday.
Great. We were going there next week. Hey, what was that? Hey, look. Bucket Boys Online.
When I got the script of RoboCop, I started reading it, and I thought it was very stupid, you know? I thought it was silly and really not something I wanted to do. I just threw it away, basically. And my wife picked it up, and she started to read it. And after she had read it, she said, well, I think you have to reread that, because it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting script, interesting levels, interesting characters. And she convinced me to read it again.
Hello. I haven't really had a chance to introduce myself. I'm Ann Lewis. Do you have a name?
Robots have come to embody the idea of how much we are in control of our own personality, how much we are the product of the things around us, and how much our minds and our bodies are divorced. When you get onto movies, like RoboCop is a good example, recently Universal Soldier, the subjects that they throw up are, when you start dismembering the body and you leave the mind intact, how much of the person is left.
And it was great to see it with an audience, because they participated very much. I saw it with, in New York, with a very mixed ethnical audience. And it was great at the end of the movie when the shooting is over and Murphy walks out of that big office there, the boardroom, and the old man is saying,
"Nice shooting, son. What's your name?"
But the audience, before he could even open his mouth, Peter Weller, the audience was already yelling, "Murphy!" And it was so great to see how the audience had by then identified with the character. And I think one of the really strong things about RoboCop is that there is some emotion there. There is something throughout the movie of a soul.
Tonight on Space.
What is all this?
It's a Halloween double bill.
Did I hear somebody scream?
First, a look at the history of horror movies in Hollywood Ghost Stories. Then,
You're trying to frighten us.
stay tuned for more macabre madness with Tales from the Crypt. Tonight on Space. Brought to you by the Pontiac Grand Am.
Thanks for your help with the stuff, guys.
You used to have a sense of humor.
You like that, Dan?
Didn't he steal your lunch money in 8th grade?
You know, I was a pudgy kid. I think he was trying to do me a favor. Hi, guys.
She broke up with you?
Yeah, she broke up with me, okay? Do you mind if I date her? Thanks, Jared.
Further proof, we guess, that minivans really are for kids.
Come on, Mama's boy, let's go. Where you going, Mama's boy? Turn the lights off. Turn that light off.
They don't come with an owner's manual. No instructions. No warranty. No 1-800 number for questions. Well, here's a tip. Healthy eyes need an optometrist. That's right. They should be examined regularly because an optometrist can help them stay healthy. Your eyes deserve an optometrist. Make an appointment today.
The blueprint of the society we live in today was being laid down in the 1950s. First jet travel, consumer society, television, the media landscape, supermarkets, motorways, airport, the airport culture. All those things we take for granted and which shape our lives today were being defined for the first time in the 1950s. And I wanted to write about this world of change, threatened with nuclear war, with sort of science for the first time being seen in a rather sinister eye.
Can you see that plane in the sky?
I see the plane.
Watch it. Perhaps we can get back to the meeting without any more skepticism.
People by the 50s had lost that optimistic confidence in the ability of science to fulfill all the dreams of mankind. Instead, you saw science about to fulfill all the nightmares of mankind. The prospect of nuclear war, I mean, was hours away.
I think one of the reasons that we're fascinated with the idea of Armageddon is that one of the things that science fiction does is to try and extrapolate what we're doing now to its most extreme conclusion. And if you believe that what we are doing now is at all non-creative or destructive, the way you dramatize that most powerfully is to say, well, it's going to end up in the end of mankind.
The seconds tick by slowly until the glare of a tremendous thermonuclear explosion blazes from its surface.
The rings of Saturn. They sure didn't spare any atoms when they loaded that charge.
Apocalyptic visions, utopian futures, and social experiments have always been part of science fiction. Then, in the revolutionary 60s, a new wave of writers emerged. In Britain, Michael Moorcock, as editor of New World magazine, fostered daring experimentation with both style and content.
That crowd that is loosely called the New Wave, and I think you could just say the generation of the 1960s, are still the ones that seem to me to have done the greatest work in print with science fiction. Nothing written since there, or by writers that have appeared since them, has had the same impact on me. There was a wonderful confluence there of the science fiction imagery and what was going on in the real world in the 1960s. The kind of surreal sense of history accelerating madly out of control, which is what the 1960s felt like, that was best conveyed, I think, in the new wave science fiction, as opposed to any realist literature that was desperately trying to keep up with the times.
One thing that brought a tremendous change in the science fiction audience was the expansion into the visual media. What I mean is the coming of the Star Trek television series Star Trek brought in eager, avid, not very critical, young fans, many, though not all of them female. The readership of science fiction circa 1967 or so took an immense leap.
Prior to actually sitting and watching the Star Trek shows, women were under the impression that you did, in fact, have to have some scientific background to write science fiction. But when they realized through watching the shows that it was just a matter of being able to say, the matter, antimatter, implosion is imminent, women thought, oh, well, we can do that too. That's not hard.
Every story I read practically had as its main character a white man who drank and smoked too much and who was about 30. So I began writing for my submission about white men who drank and smoked too much and who were about 30. It's not surprising that these were rejected.
The cancellation of the space program contributed to the bleak outlook found in many books of the 70s. Stories were now set on Earth and reflected the uncertainties of the post-60s era.
The best writers of science fiction in the 70s all consciously or unconsciously perceived themselves as myth makers. Samuel R. Delany, Roger Zelazny, Ballard, Aldous, they were dealing with archetypical material against the enormous screen that the future provides, and were running social experiments, philosophical experiments of the gaudiest kind.
Storage Area 9 self-destructed last week and destroyed the ship's entire supply of toilet paper. That's all.
Long live Cade Foster.
Wednesdays on Space.
I'm going to kill him. Why doesn't that surprise me?
Now in its second hit season.
God help us.
First Wave. Wednesdays on Space, the Imagination Station.
This Halloween, to make $1 million each, all they have to do is make it through the night alive. House on Haunted Hill. Now playing at a theater near you.
Attention, everyone! The UFAs are coming this way!
The invasion has begun.
It was a saucer. A flying saucer?
No, UFAs, unidentified flying appliances.
Now you must disclose your mission.
Space, the Imagination Station, and Hamilton Beach have launched 25 UFA prize packs into the stratosphere, and we need your help tracking them down.
I see. I understand.
Tune in to Movies from Space every weeknight this month. When you spot one of these unidentified flying appliances, call the toll-free number on the screen for your chance to win one of these Hamilton Beach prize packs, consisting of the unbelievable Stay Clean Kettle, the startling Meal Maker Express, the thrilling IntelliToast Toaster Oven, and the astonishing Ultra Steam Iron.
It's all rather exciting, isn't it?
Keep watching the skies and find the UFAs today.
Stomach upset? Soothe things over with your stomach. Pepto lets you stomach it.
Saturdays on Space.
Sydney, hi.
Exotic Adventure with Tia Carrere as the Relic Hunter. Saturdays on Space.
Let's not get carried away now.
John Carpenter was doing a graduate film then, which ultimately ended up being Dark Star, and it was a science fiction film. And I went to work with him on it, and in so doing, I brought with me an entire childhood of familiarity with the themes and devices of science fiction, and for the first time, it occurred to me I might be involved in science fiction again.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, fire.
Some space travel films of the early 50s strove for a degree of scientific accuracy. Based on a Robert Heinlein novel, George Powell's production of Destination Moon drew on the expertise of scientists working on the American space program.
The picture you've been reading about in every important national magazine and newspaper. Among them, Life. This week, the New York Times, Popular Science, Seeing Stars, Popular Mechanics, Parade, the New York Daily News.
Destination Moon, for instance, that was the first serious science fiction movie, outer space movie, you might say, where they went to the moon and there weren't any monsters or anything else. And for its time in 1950, it was just as accurate as you could possibly get. You couldn't get any closer than that. He had the first spacewalk.
This was back when Hollywood was going to the science fiction writers to begin with. Let's say something that went out of fashion very quickly. It was only, when you look at the original boom films, there was The Thing, which was based on a science fiction writer's novella. There was War of the Worlds, obviously based on H.G. Wells. He came from outer space. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, again based on a Ray Bradbury story. And for a while there, the filmmakers were actually using science fiction as their basis for their films. But the fashion went out very quickly when they realized they could write any old tripe and get away with it.
Danger, adventure, and breathtaking thrills come rocketing to the screen as science smashes a new frontier in the world of tomorrow. See a man-carrying rocket travel 240,000 miles to land on a spaceship. See man explore the desolated areas of the moon. See for the first time thrilling pictures of the world of tomorrow.
The Joint Chiefs have conferred with the President and it's been decided to change your mission. You are now Moon Base number 1. You will remain where you are and show the flag until such time as you can be relieved by a larger permanent force.
I think one of the classics is certainly Forbidden Planet. Oddly enough, of course, it's based on Shakespeare's The Tempest, so they had a fairly good scriptwriter to begin with.
Science fiction works best when it's artistically ambitious and when it's allegorical and when it's using classic texts. There's no reason why sci-fi shouldn't deal with exactly the same themes that Shakespeare dealt with. The genre is completely capable of supporting those themes. But when the public say, oh, we don't want that, we'd like robots fighting on Mars, please, and can you stop all this arty nonsense? Studios hate it. So they ran away with their heads in their hands saying, that's it. Arty science fiction, forget about it. We want robots fighting on Mars.
On toward Mars, with disaster threatening at every moment. Human emotions caught up in the terrific tension of the flight. Here is the suspense, the surprise, the drama of the unknown. Flight to Mars.
We have been expecting you. You will come with us now.
Amazing underground Martian cities.
In the modern era, if you're willing and able to stay the course and bring out your wallet and and push for it, you can put virtually any image convincingly on a screen. And of course, the immediate casualty was any other aspect of the film.
It's a completely wrong idea to believe that sci-fi is obsessed with special effects. It isn't. Bad sci-fi is obsessed with special effects.
Visual effects are all part and parcel of the science fiction scenario in these kind of films. When people say that special effects are stealing the show and becoming all too important in a feature film, I think that's a sort of kind of silly thing to say, because the subject matter itself lends itself so clearly to special visual effects. I was always very inspired by the work of Douglas Trumbull, initially on 2001, with his breakthrough visuals, that I don't think anyone had sort of seen before. And a great deal of the credit should go to Stanley Kubrick for that.
What Kubrick tried to do was to take science fiction into the future by being very somber, by working very methodically through getting rid of the idea of fantasy. He was actually putting sort of, space travel into realistic terms.
With Kubrick's films, there's a sort of a classic composition with his shots. They're very simple, they have an enormous grandeur to them. They'll never date.
One of the things that 2001 is applauded for is that it's scientifically very accurate. There is no noise in outer space, which is very correct. And it takes 7 months or whatever it is to get to Jupiter and that kind of thing. Actually, ironically, I think that's one of the things that marks it as not a science fiction movie, because its dependency on scientific accuracy seems to me to undermine the other ideas in the film. It seems to me that Kubrick is more concerned about getting the scientific accuracy right than he is about exploring the kind of allegorical subtext of the stories themselves. Now, of course, Arthur C. Clarke is a very scientific man, a very scientific writer, and is very concerned with genuinely extrapolating the way in which mankind is going to progress.
When I wrote 2001 about going to the moons of going to Jupiter, I thought that was it. But then the Voyager space probes went and showed what fantastic places these were, and I was able to write 2 more books based on what the scientists had discovered. So there'll always be a moving frontier of scientific knowledge, but the science fiction writers can move on beyond the frontier.
I think people go to SF movies for very different reasons. An SF movie that I would love as a movie, I wouldn't even bother to read as a book. And I think it's the spectacle, it's the special effects, it's the atmosphere, it's all of that. It's just the sheer thrill of seeing this stuff brought to life.
I'd forgotten how much I hate space travel.
Star Wars worked very well for me, and as a science fiction person, that's sacrilege to say, but what a combination of comics and science fiction there. I watched that first break into the spaceship and thought, wow, a real laser gun fight.
Absolute nostalgia. George Lucas set out to make a hit film with a relatively small budget, and he wanted to make a film that would make people feel good about themselves. And what he did was he looked back to the classic eras of science fiction and said, I want to reproduce that. I want that swashbuckler in space feel. I want the space epic. I want to get rid of all this nihilism, which has really been blighting science fiction, throughout the 1970s.
Fun begins.
How long before you can make the jump to light speed?
Take a few moments to get the coordinates from the Navicomputer.
You kidding? The rate they're gaining?
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
What's that flashing?
Hallucinated reflector shield.
Don't trap yourselves in. I'm going to make the jump to light speed.
Tonight on Space.
The world as you know it has changed.
Evacuate now!
Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict. Tonight on Space.
I look forward to our association.
The Slalom from B.F. Goodrich. At last, a winter tire that grips to ice and bites into snow like nothing else. Slalom from B.F. Goodrich. Because Canadian winters aren't fit for man or beast.
Hi, I'm Dave Mustaine. I'm David Ellison, and we are from Megadeth. Getting spacey here. You can win a trip to see us in Las Vegas.
That's right. Space and Megadeth want you to take a risk on a desert crawl you'll never forget.
Tell them what they can win, Steve.
Thanks, Dave. We'll fly you and a friend round trip to Las Vegas, set you up for spending money, hotel, and tickets to see Megadeth live in concert.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's not all.
Not by a long shot. We'll cruise you down the extraterrestrial highway to that hotbed of alien activity, Area 51.
You're on your own for that.
That is, if you're up to the risk. Head for any participating Music World location and pick up an entry form or just send in a plain postcard with all your vitals to Megadeth Rock Space, 299 Queen Street West, Toronto, Ontario, M5B2Z5. And be sure to answer this trivia question. What is the name of Megadeth's latest CD release? So, what are you waiting for?
Enter now and enter often.
Hey, it's my line.
I saw 9 objects flying with a speed of somewhere around 1,000 miles per hour. They looked like saucers.
एक उड़ती थाली सी चीज बहुत जोर से पश्चिम से पूरब उड़ गई.
Flying saucers.
The 50s obsession with invasion was reflected in a flurry of reported UFO sightings. Cinema of the 50s is also full of alien visitors. Most of these were pulp shockers, but one or two had strong stories and rich characters.
The plot, the story, the characters. That's the most important thing. You must get that good and right and involving an audience. And then you dress it with the required special effects or locations, if it happens to be that. Then you dress it up. If you don't have that foreground, you can put the best effects in the world in or the best locations, and it isn't going to do it for an audience. I was called by Daryl Zanuck, who was running the studio there, and he handed me the script for The Day the Earth Stood Still, written by Edmund North, from a short story. And I took it off and read it and absolutely responded so positively, loved it, loved not only the idea of it, having science fiction here on Earth, but also, of course, what it had to say. It's an indictment of atomic warfare.
We have come to visit you in peace and with goodwill.
And I say it was lucky for us because here was somebody brand new to the screen. So this visitor from another planet had never been seen by anybody in the movie on it. And he had this rather tall, ascetic, almost an earthly kind of look about him.
I am Klaatu. If you're not interested or if you intend to turn me over to your army, we needn't waste any more time.
Sit down, please. There are several thousand questions I'd like to ask you.
See, I'm a great believer in UFOs. I've never seen one, never had an experience like that. But I think for us to think that we here on Earth are the only possible intelligence in the whole tremendous universe and universes beyond is just the most egotistical kind of feeling and attitude to have. I think there has to be that. There has to be other life out there.
There have always been two different threads of science fiction, despite the fact that people will try and simplify it and say sci-fi in the 1950s was ragingly xenophobic and it was very anti-communist. That's not actually, necessarily always the case, although there is clearly a red menace being represented by many of the kind of extraterrestrial invasion movies.
Invaders from Mars, capturing humans at will for their own sinister purposes, turning them into diabolical instruments of destruction. Invaders from Mars, weird, fantastic beings of a superintelligence, ruling a race of synthetic humans and pitting them against mankind's dream to conquer the universe. Father turned against son. People changed into strange, weird animals.
A general of the army becomes a saboteur. Trusted police turned into arsonists.
The Martians! They've got to stop
The thing about the science fiction movie in the 1950s is almost invariably it's not a science fiction movie. It's a movie of horror. And horror movies depend on a violation of the norm and some kind of reconstruction of the normal world afterwards. So that always in the 1950s, you'll notice that science fiction movies, so-called, end in the destruction of the science fiction element.
Fiendish, crawling things. From Antarctica, frozen for 1,000,000 years, to a small naval outpost in the Pacific comes a cargo of deviltry, devastation, death. Attacking bodies, destroying minds.
During the 60s and 70s, monsters were largely absent from science fiction cinema. Those that were present were often unintentionally funny.
Chilling terror in a desperate, endless fight against the nameless horror.
Those things are multiplying. There's no telling how fast. I wouldn't be surprised if it got up to be hundreds, maybe even thousands. The whole island would be covered with them.
By the end of the 60s, cinema monsters needed an injection of new life.
Dark Star was a comedy, and in the course of working on that, gradually there had materialized a non-comedy in my mind, a frightening version that I'd been toying with. It might have started at the moment when we had such trouble getting an effective monster. It ended up being the beach ball with feet.
Attention, attention. Elevator descending. Please clear the shaft.
I just knew that we had made a comedy and nobody had laughed, and I was burned about it, and I thought, well, if I can't make them laugh, maybe I can make them scream. I met the Swiss painter, Giger, and I was turning through his pictures. The thought that bubbled up was that if this guy's work could be put onto a movie screen, it would be the most extraordinary monster anyone has ever seen.
There's a very sexual threat to it. I mean, it's obviously a very sexual creature, and there's a very weird thing about the kind of the combination of attraction and repulsion of it. In the first movie, in Alien, I remember physically the most uncomfortable part of that entire movie was the end when Ripley is trapped in this little escape ship, and she's stripping down to her underwear, and this big phallic creature is sitting in the dark, you know, oozing slime all over, and I remember sitting in the theater going, even being uncomfortable around my friends, just wanting to go home and take a shower.
People have said it's a cancer metaphor, you know, for something growing inside you and taking over you. So there's many levels, and that's what makes a great creature, is when it taps into fears, and that conversely is where some creatures fail, where they just don't have the deep roots that can, you know, make them grow and blossom into really scary things. How do you disguise a person? The cheapest thing that you can do in a film is to put a makeup on someone and have him walk around, you know, talking, you know, out of syntax, you know, and there you have an alien.
With the swiftness of a deadly cosmic ray, the Earth is invaded by indestructible moon monsters. Their ghastly mission, death for all humans. What astounding technical developments are being made to protect mankind? Robot Monster brings you an actual preview of the devastating forces of our future. Unsuspected revelations of incredible horrors that will terrify you with their brutal reality.
Fool humans, there is no escape.
We are going to land a man on the moon.
Can we do this?
We have to. There was a fire. They're dead.
The moment a man steps on the moon will be a definitive one. We're confident in our training, in our engineering, and in ourselves.
We are going to go out there and say, damn it, we really did something.
The Emmy-winning From the Earth to the Moon begins November 16th on Space.
Quarterly earnings for Arliss Corporation will be released after market today. Analysts say this is one to watch.
With everything moving so fast, how do you find the time to make the trades or buy the stock you believe will perform? Now you can with a Royal Bank Action Direct investment account. You'll start with one easy call and up to $100 in free trades and have instant online access to valuable research, real-time quotes, and breaking news. You can buy the stock you want whenever you want and pay much lower fees every time.
Call today to open your Royal Bank Action Direct investment account and you'll receive up to $100 in free trades. Plus, if you call right now, you'll also get a copy of the Principles of Equity Investing. This informative guide will tell you how to make the most of your resources and achieve success in the fast-paced equity market.
It's your money and your future, so make your own moves. Call Royal Bank Action Direct today. It's the new way to invest.
Welcome to Star TV. Star TV means celebrities.
You're in for a treat.
Well, that's something. Everything you need to know about your favorite Canadian star.
I didn't know I wanted to be an actor.
That's my workout of the day.
I do my best work in front of the mirror.
From actors to athletes to politicians to musicians.
I love that stuff.
This is definitely the life.
Star TV on Star, the entertainment information station.
In 1984, William Gibson launched cyberpunk with his novel Neuromancer. Cyberpunk is a fast, graphic offshoot of pop culture where high-tech meets low-life in a world of computer hackers, techno-geeks, and recycled body parts.
Some of my readers assume that I do my writing on something that looks like a stealth bomber with the serial numbers filed off. But in fact, I use a very primitive, obsolete computer, which I only got about 2 years ago. And before that, I wrote on a manual typewriter. And when I started writing this stuff, I'd never touched the computer. And I think it gave me a certain strange edge in terms of imagination, and that I wasn't really hindered by what was possible.
The whole problem of cyberpunk is that cyberpunk is a literary rather than a visual thing. People say there hasn't yet been a good cyberpunk movie, and the reason for that is it is very, very hard, maybe impossible, to express on screen the ideas that cyberpunk comes up with. One of the things that I think is very indicative is that William Gibson was asked to write a script for Alien 3, which was thrown out like that because it was unfilmable. They couldn't do it.
Neil Stephenson's book's a wonderful extension of William Gibson, really. If there's a successor to Neuromancer, then Snow Crash is definitely it.
When I wrote Snow Crash, I was living in a suburban area. And I've spent days driving through this suburban area, seeing the same franchises over and over again in the same landscape, and I came to realize that that was really the future. Not the post-apocalyptic wasteland, not the desert, and not the city, but the suburb. It's going to be a suburban future, and it's all going to look the same. Cyberpunk is a very clear demonstration of the way the present and the future interpenetrate. The cyberpunk heroes are you and me if we were more computer literate than we happen to be, or poorer, and they live in worlds which they do not understand, but which they are streetwise to.
Cyberpunk, it seems to me, is, like all science fiction, is a statement of a certain kind of values. As far as I can tell, Cyberpunk is saying the future is going to be horrible, so get what you can and run with it. And that seems to me to be taking the easy way out. I've never been happy with their position on the 21st century. Pretending that it's going to be a Dashiell Hammett novel just isn't an adequate response.
If I really want to jerk people's strings, all I have to do is sort of go out into the real world and find things that disturb me and bring them back into the book. Because the real world is much more frightening than any alien planet that anyone's ever going to dream up. As J.G. Ballard, the great English science fiction writer, said a few years ago, Earth is the alien planet.
If cyberpunk is largely a literary form, then its visual counterpart is being explored in advanced digital effects and new revolutionary media.
I think every extravagant visual idea that a writer can put on paper nowadays, I think you can translate into a shot.
Nothing has happened in motion pictures in the last half a century. I mean, it's still in the steam machine age, for no reason whatsoever. So it's a very peculiar thing that the most powerful medium has not kept up with the times at all. Now that is going to change very, very, very drastically and very, very fast.
I think one may see a completely new kind of fiction being created. I mean, a genuinely interactive fiction, and this would apply to film as well, where the spectator would not be a passive observer of events taking place on a screen, but actually be in the imaginary space of the film and dictating the course of the action. This, of course, leads itself to incredible possibilities. I mean, one will, let's say, be able to take part in the assassination of President Kennedy and perhaps play the part of the assassin, Oswald, simultaneously swap seats with, Jackie and sit beside the president as part of his head is, blown to pieces. The possibilities of genuinely interactive virtual reality are limitless. I mean, one can imagine the human race deciding to climb into the virtual reality system and not come out again.
Any dream, anything that you can possibly imagine, you can realize inside a computer. So that creates an entirely new vocabulary, all sorts of new challenges, and completely will change storytelling in itself, will create a new mythology for our times. There's absolutely no limitations whatsoever. The only limitations are one's imagination.
SF doesn't tend to be a really young person's thing. I'd sort of say the optimum age is 20 to 40 for your serious SF reader. All walks of life, bank managers, students, housewives, house husbands, everybody.
Classic authors, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke.
All the George Lucas films.
1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World and Island by Huxley.
Marion Zimmer Bradley, I like her books, and McCaffrey as well.
Robert Heinlein.
Bruce Sterling, a lot of cyberpunk stuff. My favorite science fiction film is Brazil. Oh yeah, Barbarella's great.
Like when I was in 7th and 8th grade, all the kids who read science fiction were like, everyone thought they were a disease or something.
Stuff from the 50s. It came from another world, Forbidden Planet.
My favorite film would be Clockwork Orange, like the Kubrick one.
Terminator and Total Recall.
Blade Runner.
There are many kinds of science fiction. There's a social satire, there's a comic science fiction, there's a visionary, surreal science fiction. What really has concerned me is what concerns any writer of anything. Who are we? What are we doing here? How do we deal with each other in society?
Electricity was a laboratory curiosity for centuries, but nobody ever predicted that Les Paul would plug in his guitar and create a new musical instrument, the electric guitar.
It's turning into many different kinds of beasts. The utopian one, the Gothic one, the satirical, the scientific, the philosophical. All these roots were there originally, and it seems to me that most of them are showing up again now.
More and more, there are people who will read science fiction, although it is not their principal interest. So I think, actually, the ghetto walls are coming down.
Science fiction embraces the whole of human activity, human knowledge, and it will always do so. And perhaps I should know, not only human, one day, hopefully, non-human.
I think it's possible that science fiction has now come to the end of the road. And there are people who think it's dead. It's won its victory. I think this is the reason why, if it's over, it's over because it's won and decided to leave the battlefield.
Tonight on Space.
What is all this?
It's a Halloween double bill.
Did I hear somebody scream?
First, a look at the history of horror movies in Hollywood Ghost Stories. Then,
You're trying to frighten us.
stay tuned for more macabre madness with Tales from the Crypt. Tonight on Space. Brought to you by the Pontiac Grand Am.
It's the way a good steak sandwich tastes like it came from a steakhouse. Introducing the HP Steak and Cheese Sandwich at Subway. Made for you, just the way you want it. Subway, the way a sandwich should be.
Hi, I'm Dave Mustaine. I'm David Ellison, and we are from Megadeth. Getting spacey here. You can win a trip to see us in Las Vegas.
That's right. Space and Megadeth want you to take a risk on a desert crawl you'll never forget.
Tell them they can win, Steve.
Thanks, Dave. We'll fly you and a friend round trip to Las Vegas, set you up with spending money, hotel, and tickets to see Megadeth live in concert.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's not all.
Not by a long shot. We'll cruise you down the extraterrestrial highway to that hotbed of alien activity, Area 51.
You're on your own for that.
That is, if you're up to the risk. Head for any participating Music World location and pick up an entry form or just send in a plain postcard with all your vitals to Megadeth Rock Space, 299 Queen Street West, Toronto, Ontario, M5B2Z5. And be sure to answer this trivia question. What is the name of Megadeth's latest CD release? So, what are you waiting for?
Enter now and enter often.
Hey, it's my line.